How Does Your Garden Grow is at Weston Nurseries. Today's seminar is Proven Winners in New England with Jane Beggs-Joles from Spring Meadows Nurseries. She will focus on the beautiful ornamental trees and shrubs that thrive in our New England gardens.
My name is Jane. Hi. And I work for Spring Meadows Nursery. And we are a wholesale nursery, so if you are not a nursery grower, you've never heard of us. And that's good, because I can't sell to you unless you are another wholesale grower. We are a propagation nursery, and our connection with Proven Winners is that we are the company that selects and introduces woody ornamentals to the Proven Winners brand. So if you see a hydrangea, a rose, a lilac, anything like that in a white Proven Winners container, it started at our nursery. We are in Grand Haven, Michigan, which is here. And you can't really see this map very well, I think, but no, you can't. It's a map of Michigan. So, okay, now you're going to get a real, okay, you know how people in Michigan tell you where they're from? This is the Lower Peninsula. We're over here. Detroit is over here. And then there's the whole Upper Peninsula up here. People on the Upper Peninsula, we call it the UP. Do you know what we call people who live up in the UP? Upers. And do you know what they call people who live on the Lower Peninsula? No? I'll give you a hint. The two peninsulas are connected by a bridge. They call us trolls because we live below the bridge. So this is our nursery. We've got about 38 acres of greenhouse space, and we grow liners. So the largest size I produce is a quart. So this is why you would never buy directly from me. If you're a homeowner, you want something that's probably at least a 1 or 3 gallon plant. We send these baby plants to nurseries throughout 49 to 50 states. We do not ship to Hawaii, so I never get to go to Hawaii. But 49 to 50 states, and we do ship to most provinces of Canada. So we send these baby plants out to other nurseries who grow them on to finished size. And that's where you'd be able to buy them. So this is our new plant development team. They're hard at work looking at hydrangeas. So you might look at that picture and be like, well, that's the kind of job I would like, right after chocolate taster or something like that. But it is a hard job, because in order to introduce a new plant, you do have to be ruthless. You have to be able to look at a pretty hydrangea and say, yeah, that flower is pretty, but what about the plant itself? If it's a pretty flower, but the stem is floppy and the flower's laying on the ground, that doesn't do us any good. We don't want that plant. If it's a pretty flower, but it only blooms once every 3 years, we don't want that either. So they have to be able to go in and look at these plants and just throw out the ones that don't meet criteria. One of the criteria is that it has to be a plant that can be propagated easily. All of our plants are produced by cuttings. So it's asexual propagation. Range is too hot. We have to open the roofs. We can add fogging to it if we need to, control the water. It's all in the name of keeping the plants happy and healthy. So the more control we have over that, the better. But plants, for us to introduce it, it has to be a plant we can propagate and that we know we can produce plenty of, because our nurseries want to know that they can get that plant year after year. Because if you're a professional landscaper, you want to know you can get that plant year after year. Because there's nothing worse than having a beautiful planting and everything's going great, and then the owner of the house has, I don't know, say a 15-year-old daughter who's a really bad driver and rolls over a plant and you need to replace it. I have a 15-year-old daughter and she's terrifying. So you need to be able to have those replacement plants. They want that assurance. So can we propagate it? Does it do well in the ground? This is our stock field, where when we have new plants that we're evaluating, we put them out in the field and we let them grow. We see what they do. They don't get a lot of special care. We ended up introducing, this is a little hydrangea called Little Quickfire Hydrangea. It's a dwarf Hydrangea paniculata. And just looking at this picture, you can see why we chose to introduce it. It's smaller than a lot of other hydrangeas, and compact size is something that we're having more and more people ask for. It opens its flowers earlier than any other Hydrangea paniculata on the market, and then those flowers turn pink. The flowers of Little Quickfire are turning pink when other varieties are just starting to open. So that, to us, was very desirable. It extended the hydrangea season. We also have an extensive trial garden at the owner of the nursery's house. He has a beautiful house on about 15 acres along the Grand River. If you think you have a nice garden, you visit Dale's garden and you will be humbled. And you will go home and say, I'm not worthy, I'm terrible. He's got, well, the guy, he's like one of the best plantsmen in the country. So where do some of our plants come from? They come from all over, literally. We have plants coming from Europe and from Asia. We've introduced plants that home gardeners have noticed, be it a seedling or a branch sport that they've noticed on a plant growing in their yard. And there's some amateur breeders, home breeders, who've introduced some of our plants. And then there are professional plant breeders. And this gentleman is one of them. This is Dr. Mark Brand, and he is a professor at the University of Connecticut, so not too far away. He's a pretty interesting guy. His plant of choice is Aronia melanocarpa, which is a native plant, very, very cold hardy, very adaptable, has a lot going for it, has the potential for having multiple seasons of interest. But there hadn't really been a concentrated effort to breed a really good ornamental Aronia melanocarpa. And he did this. He went around and collected germplasm of Aronia melanocarpa from its complete range. And he sowed it out. This is his field where he had all of his seedlings growing. This here is barberry. We're just going to ignore that. But this is the Aronia. So he sowed all these seeds out, and he started evaluating them, just the wild seeds that he had collected. And then he started breeding. He was looking for an Aronia melanocarpa that would be, he was looking for something that was small, compact, something that had good flowering, that had good fall foliage, and that had a nice full habit. And as he was breeding, he got some that were small, but they were kind of straggly looking. And he didn't want that. He wanted a nice full plant, and this is what he got. You can see it's very full, very dense, the nice white spring flowers, and only about 2 feet tall. It's a tiny little plant. He is very, very excited about it. This year will be the first year there's probably very many on the market. He's very excited about it because it speaks to a lot of the things that we've had people ask for. People want more native plants. They want plants that support wildlife. They want plants that are small, plants that aren't going to be too much trouble in the landscape. And there's also an active need for plants to replace some of our more standard landscape plants that have proven to be a little bit of a problem. This has excellent fall color. So Aronia melanocarpa is a good candidate to replace burning bush in landscapes. He also recommends this in place of Grollo sumac. Grollo sumac is a standard used in a lot of landscapes. It has a lot of merits, but frankly, I think Grollo sumac is ugly. So this is far more attractive. It does have that, it sends out rhizomes, so it does colonize a bit, not as much as Rhus aromatica, but it will colonize. And as Dr. Brand points out, the Aronia has more impact, is more helpful to wildlife, because you do get these black fruit in the fall. So wildlife can eat these. So can people, if you want to. This is not a plant that I would recommend if you want to be an Aronia grower for wine, producing wine or jellies and things like that. This is not a heavy enough fruiting to be used as an orchard plant. There are Aronia that do that. There are Aronia, and for a long time, that's where a lot of the breeding was producing fruit for orchards, especially in like Russia, behind the Iron Curtain. Aronia is very high in vitamin C. So they developed some Aronia varieties that they could grow and process into juice for people. And we've got a guy out in Iowa who is growing Aronia, like acres and acres of it, to make wine. Who knew? Anyway, that was kind of a tangent. This is not, if you want to grow Aronia to make your own wine, this is not the one I'd choose. Go get another one. But if you want a great landscape plant, this is the one to choose. Now, he also developed a little bit bigger plant, Aronia lowscape hedger. A little bit bigger, about like that. This might be even a better candidate to replace burning bush, because it is a little bit bigger. It does have the nice white flowers in the spring, and it does have good fall color. It does not fruit, and this is because it's a triploid. He explained the breeding to me. I won't go into it in detail, but he used some parentage that is difficult to produce, that is not very cooperative when it comes to producing fruit. But he was able to coax some seedlings out of it and select this plant. So the absence of fruit means that it's probably not the best choice if you're looking for wildlife habitat. However, if you're looking at a planting where it's going in maybe a municipal setting or just any landscape where you don't want to deal with the mess of fruit, that's where this one might be a really good choice. And it is a little bit bigger plant. So great alternative to burning bush. And we are actively looking for plants that can replace the existing plants that are proving to be invasive or have some other issues in the landscape. Hydrangea arborescens is another one of our native plants. This is smooth hydrangea. So this is Dr. Tom Rainey. And Dr. Rainey is a plant breeder in Asheville, North Carolina. He works up at the Mountain Research Station up in Asheville. If you've never been to Asheville, you should find a reason to go to Asheville, because Asheville is awesome. So I think he's kind of got the best gig ever. He gets to live and work up there breeding plants. So who wouldn't want to do that? This is the man who was at the time his graduate student, Richard Olson. Now Richard is a plant breeder in his own right. I can't remember where he went off to, but he got to work under Dr. Rainey. Again, he's in Asheville, North Carolina. Awesome place. What does a graduate student go when they have a couple hours of free time? They go hiking in the Appalachians, and he did. So he was out for a hike, and he found a stand of our native Hydrangea arborescens growing in the mountains, and he noticed one of them had pink flowers. So we're all really lucky that he was a plant breeding graduate student and not like hog breeding or something like that, because he knew that this was something special. And he brought the plant back, and they started breeding it. They started breeding it against the established varieties like Annabelle, going back and forth, lining them out. And I'm sorry, the light in here, you can't really see how great this is. This just shows the breadth of colors that they were able to get out of the genome of Hydrangea arborescens. Some pretty nice pinks getting into purples, close to red. So they line these out, they're breeding, they're selecting. They're looking for a couple different things. One is color, Because hydrangea arborescens, for a long time, you could have it in white or you could have it in white. And people in cold climates were just glad to have a hydrangea that flowered at all. But there was a real demand for a hydrangea arborescens in something other than white. They were looking for strong stems. Hydrangea arborescens is notorious for being floppy, kind of a sloppy plant. Smaller size. Again, we go back to size. People wanting things that stay compact. And they wanted rebloom. They were looking for a plant that would flower continuously throughout the summer. They introduced Invincibelle Spirit. A few years later, we replaced it with Invincibelle Spirit 2, which is head and shoulders above the original Invincibelle Spirit. This is Invincibelle Spirit 2, much sturdier stems, better rebloom, nice color. Now, the reason I tell this story is to illustrate how plant breeders work. Where we introduced Invincibelle Spirit and we were excited about it, it was a breakthrough plant. Very happy. But as we introduced it, they kept breeding. They kept going. They wanted to make something better. Because that's what plant breeders do. They are never happy. They always want something better. And in this case, they got something better. And let's see, we introduced in the original Invincibelle Spirit in 2010, which was the year that they made the initial cross for Invincibelle Spirit 2. And we introduced Invincibelle Spirit 2 in 2016. So why are there new plants coming out? It's because plant breeders just keep on going. No one is a plant breeder because they want to make lots of money. They do it because they love it. So they have a success. That's just a challenge to get something better. So it's exciting. It means we're going to have more exciting new plants coming through. This is Invincibelle Ruby, which came out of the same breeding program. We introduced this just a couple years ago. A little bit darker color. The florets have two colors to them. There'll be a little bit of a silvery on one side and then a darker pink on the other. And this is a really strong rebloomer. This is a nice plant. This is one our growers are really excited about. And I put this chart in just to show sort of the breadth of what they've been able to do with their hydrangea arborescens breeding. And you can't see the color very well, but definitely breeding for smaller size, breeding for more intense color. We've got some pretty good pinks edging into purple, edging into red. I expect in the coming years we will see a nice burgundy coming out. They're just going to push it as far as they can. You're not going to see blue. A blue hydrangea arborescens is not going to happen outside of a secret government lab somewhere. But no, it's not in the genome of hydrangea arborescens. So this is one of theirs, Invincibelle Limetta. We introduced that last year, I think. Tiny little plant, very full, has green flowers. Now, 30 years ago, if you had said a plant with green flowers, people would be like, you're crazy. No, green flowers. And then Hydrangea Limelight came out, and that just blew people away. I think that's our top seller ever. And Hydrangea Limelight proved that that beautiful chartreuse color is just something that works so well in a lot of situations. So Limetta, tiny, but more of a mop head flower. The arborescens have mop heads. And it does rebloom very well. This is a beautiful little plant. It looks nice in a container. Now, I generally do not recommend hydrangea arborescens in containers. They're just a plant that is better in ground. But these dwarf ones do present pretty nicely in a container. And I have seen them being used as a container plant. Still a little on the fence about it because it goes against everything that I know about hydrangea arborescens, but I've seen them working. I think it's kind of cool because they are cold hardy. You guys know the kind of the rule for overwintering things above ground? That the rule of thumb is you can overwinter something above ground in a container if it's rated one zone hardier than where you live. So if you are living in a USDA zone 5, you should theoretically be able to overwinter something above ground in a container if it's rated to USDA zone 4 or or 3 or 2. But remember, cold isn't everything. Dormant does not mean dead. They still need some water. Those roots still need some water. I've seen freeze dry and kill stuff when the cold doesn't, so just be aware of that. So this is Invincibelle limetta, dwarf, rebloomer, native plant, really beautiful little plant. Its sister plant, Invincibelle mini mauvette, kind of purple. We weren't quite ready to call it purple, so we settled for mauve. The buds are very dark, kind of like the color of that lady's jacket back right there. There's my mini mauve, kind of like that. Yeah, kind of like that. And then they open, and you have more of a mauve. There's a little bit more pink to it, and they dry really beautifully. So very pretty plant. And then there's this guy. This is wee white. It's a dwarf Annabelle. So that's something that dwarf Annabelle people, I tease landscapers, like, I know you guys, you have your like fantasy football teams, right? This is on your fantasy landscape list. You're like, oh, if I had a dwarf Annabelle, what could I do with it? They already have jobs lined up. They've just been waiting. So here we have dwarf Annabelle. Have fun with it. Great little plant. And then for something on the other end of the spectrum is INCREDIBALL hydrangea. This is a bigger plant, and this came out of our internal breeding program. We were looking for an Annabelle that had sturdy stems and didn't flop. We got it, but we got really big flowers too. So this is INCREDIBALL hydrangea. If you have a small space, I really would rather you not plant this there, because it's a big scale plant. It's got big leaves, it's got big flowers, it's got a big personality. One is great as a specimen, or if you have the space and you want to do this hedge, I love this shot because pretty much anyone on the continent, except for maybe like Arizona, if you got enough space, you can probably have this hedge because hydrangea arborescens are so adaptable. They will take full sun. Once established, they have good drought tolerance. No problem with the cold. I sell these in Manitoba. I just caution people with this hedge. If you want this hedge, you should have planted it a couple years ago. You will not get the really big flowers on an immature plant. It needs to be a mature plant. I recommend a minimum of a 3-gallon. If you can lay your hands on a 5-gallon, buy it. Put it in the ground, let the plants get established. They need a year or so to get their legs under them, get established. The bigger flowers come with an established mature plant. And although hydrangea arborescens are not, hydrangea arborescens are drought tolerant, if the plant is under heat or water stress, the flowering will be compromised. In very hot weather and very dry weather, you will have fewer flowers and they will not be as large. So if you know that you need to have lots of big flowers for a wedding or something like that, make sure you've got some irrigation that you can put in case you run into some hot and dry weather. But the plant itself will be happy. I've never irrigated my INCREDIBALL hydrangeas. They got maybe some water the week I planted them, and they're like, oh, whatever, go do your thing. And they've been fine. They've been happy. But I have noticed the flowering affected by how much heat we have and how much water we have. So there you can see nice big flowers. If you want pink, we have INCREDIBALL pink or INCREDIBALL blush, which is a little bit softer, more refined pink than what we see on the Invincibelles. Now the INCREDIBALLs are not the rebloomers that the Invincibelles are, but very, very pretty plants. But then there's blue. If you want blue, you gotta look at the Hydrangea macrophyllus or the Hydrangea serratas. So this is Blue Jangles. Blue Jangles is a reblooming Hydrangea macrophylla. So when we selected for reblooming, we're looking for compact plants with strong rebloom and really good color. Now, if you grew reblooming macrophyllus several years ago and you weren't super happy with them, I really encourage you to look at the next generation. We're already on to like the 3rd generation of Hydrangea macrophylla, reblooming Hydrangea macrophyllus. Obviously, my nursery does them. Other nurseries do them too. But you will see a huge difference between the first wave and the current breeding that's coming out now. The rebloom starts earlier in the season. The flowers are bigger. The flowers have better color. It's important to know with Hydrangea macrophylla that the reblooming ones are not any hardier than a standard like a Nico blue. So if your Nico blues are getting nailed to the ground every year, your reblooming ones are also going to get nailed to the ground. What the rebloomers do is give you a second chance at flowers, and they will come back from the base and they will grow and produce flowers on new wood. So we like blue jangles. Nice blue. It's really easy to turn blue too. You know, the flower color of macrophyllas and serratas is affected by the soil, and the blue jangles turns very easily. This is tiny tough stuff, which is a Hydrangea serrata. Hydrangea serrata is very closely related to Hydrangea macrophylla. It too has flowers that are affected by the soil. I prefer Hydrangea serrata because it has better bud hardiness. Serratas are native to the mountainous regions of Asia, and you know, the mountains, you have the temperature swings, especially in spring. So these plants have evolved to have better bud hardiness and take those fluctuations better. Tiny tough stuff, wonderful little plant, reblooming. This is the original tough stuff. You can see there's some difference in the flower colors that you'll get. These are just beautiful, elegant plants, very, very strong rebloomers. And this is the newest one. We're introducing this year, Tough Stuff Aha, which has really big flowers, kind of like a water lily look. I don't know if you'll be able to get these finished this year. It might be next year. But if your macrophyllas if you struggle with macrophyllas, if you're in a little bit of a cold pocket, check out the serratas. These are nice rebloomers and just beautiful plants. And then there's Hydrangea paniculata. If you want something that's kind of a no-brainer, Hydrangea paniculata. They bloom on new wood like the arborescens do. They typically open white, and we've been selecting for plants that color up earlier in the season. This is Hydrangea firelight. So it opens white, and then it turns this dark pink, kind of pomegranate red in the summer. It's a bigger plant. It's a full-size paniculata, which is great. I mean, in some situations, you want that big plant. Other places, you might want a really small plant. This is Bobo Hydrangea paniculata. It's the smallest paniculata on the market, about 3 feet tall. Nice plant for container gardens, just covered in these white flowers in the summer. And this is just, it's a fun little plant. Our growers love it, retailers love it, homeowners love it, everybody loves Bobo, right? And the flowers will turn pink later in the season. And little lime is dwarf limelight. Now limelight it's been my favorite plant for many years. I love limelight, but it's big, it's a beast, you know, it can be really big. So having a smaller version of it is really useful, and that's where little lime comes in. Same with little quickfire. It's a dwarf version of the original quickfire hydrangea. Quickfire and little quickfire are the first Hydrangea paniculatas to flower in the spring, early summer. So if you do a little bit of homework, you can have Hydrangea paniculatas start early in the season and then go later into the summer. And we have got a wide array of sizes and colors, pushing into red and purple as far as we can. There is no blue. No blue. Not going to happen. Okay, little plants. Buddleia. Pugster. Pugster is, it's a fun little plant because it is dwarf, but the flowers are like full-size Buddleia flowers. So it's sort of disorienting how big the flowers are on these tiny little plants. But they are nice little mounds of these very large, fragrant flowers, and just a totally different look for a buddleia. Really fun. You know, the older buddleias were huge. They did what you wanted them to do. They attracted butterflies, but they took up a lot of space. So being able to have the fragrance and the butterflies without so much space, we think is really valuable. So pugsters are something that our growers are really excited about. I think we're going to be seeing some nice ones of these on the market. I mean, I like to highlight the white flowers because a lot of people don't like white flowers, but I do. I think if you're like me, you work long hours, you don't get home till later in the evening, that's when like a white flower is really pretty, right? You get to enjoy it. Okay, bloomerang. This is a reblooming lilac. So we introduced the bloomerangs a few years ago. This was the original one, bloomerang purple. It's a small plant, and it reblooms. It flowers at the normal lilac time, and then it goes into like a rest phase, maybe 6 weeks, and then it starts blooming again. I do recommend pruning it. This thing has got auto on it. I do recommend pruning the bloomerang hydrangeas immediately after the spring bloom. That's the time if you want to shape it at all. That's the time to do it. These are small plants, so they don't need heavy pruning, but that's the time to shape it. It also encourages the new growth, and the new growth is where the reblooming, the second blooms come from, is from the new growth. So we introduced dark purple a few years after the original bloomerang. As the name would suggest, a little bit darker flowers, a little bit bigger plant. Still not as big as the old-fashioned lilacs. And then these are new this year. This is bloomerang dwarf pink. So it's, you know, about like this big. So maybe a really nice fit for a smaller landscape. So we've got the dwarf pink, and we've got dwarf purple coming on. So we're trying to have some plants that give people some options. Lilacs are kind of like forsythia. They're great. You know, everyone knows them, everyone loves them, everyone wants them. They're enjoyable plants. But traditionally, they do their thing, and then they just kind of sit there taking up space the rest of the season. So, and there's nothing wrong with having some one-hit wonders in your yard, but I encourage people to be strategic about it. So if you want a lilac or you want a forsythia, if you are constrained on space, like many of us are, get the most bang for your buck, right? Get the smaller plants that isn't going to take up too much space so that you can go on and plant other more interesting things in that space. And if you can get a lilac that blooms twice, well then it's a little bit better gardening investment, right? I have a friend who is a landscape designer in the Bay Area, which the real estate is absolutely insane there. And when he talks to his clients, he asks them, you know, is that plant paying its rent? You think about how much a square foot of space costs. You know, do you want to put a plant that doesn't make you really happy there? Do you want to put a plant that only does one thing for a week there? Get as much out of that square foot as you can. And that's something that kind of clicks, right? I mean, if you're paying $1 million for like a 2-bedroom bungalow or whatever it is it costs out there, yeah, you can get a little bit better plant, right? And get a little more enjoyment out of it. So, spilled wine weigela. This is a compact form of wine and roses weigela. Wine and roses has been a very popular plant for many years because it's awesome. It's a great plant. But it can get a little bit big. You see that we've got a trend here. Awesome plants that we really like, but you know how people are. It's like, oh, that's really great. I just wish it was a little smaller, right? We're never happy, right? We want something a little bit smaller, so that's what we're trying to do. Spilled wine tends to be a little wider than it is tall and is a really nice mass planting. You have that beautiful foliage and the hot pink flowers. Very useful plant. Weigela has pretty good deer resistance, too, which I believe you guys have some deer here. A really good reference for deer resistance is Rutgers University. They have a really good online tool that rates the relative deer resistance of plants. And if you guys think you have a deer problem, you go to North Jersey. I mean, I've seen grown men like almost crying about what the deer do there, you know. But it's seriously, it's a very good reference for checking. There's no such thing as deer proof. There's deer resistant. You can encourage your neighbor to plant lots of hostas, and maybe they'll go over there and you're okay, but you didn't hear, I didn't say that. So deer resistant, spirea. Spirea is a plant they typically aren't super crazy about. So we were trying to make spirea a little sexier, right? Because spireas, everyone knows spirea. They're at every gas station everywhere. So we're trying to make them a little more exciting. And we think we have it with double play candy corn. That's got these really bright yellow leaves and orange new growth. What I really like is this is it leafing out in the spring. It's like fire engine red. Now, I work at a nursery full of plant snobs. We're, you know, I'm not putting a spirea in my yard. We all went out and looked at this. We're like, oh, this is so cool. I have to put a spirea in my yard. I can't believe it. No. Double plate candy corn we're very excited about. And you can see it's got this beautiful habit. It's just this nice little cupcake of a plant sitting out there being happy, being colorful. Yeah, I love it. I don't apologize. Pearl Glam is a calicarpa. Calicarpa, or beautyberry, is an awesome plant. Unfortunately, it doesn't really look like much in the spring when many people are shopping. So we're excited about Pearl Glam because not only does it have a nice habit, it has really nice fruiting, it also has nice purple foliage. So you get a little more interest. You know, going back to that, is every plant really earning its keep? And this gives calicarpa a little bit more value in the landscape. Okay, Sprinter boxwood. It looks like a boxwood. It does boxwood things. It sits there and it's green. And if you or someone you know really likes to prune, boxwood is the plant for you. Very deer resistant. So what makes Sprinter different? Sprinter is faster growing. And that's good for our growers, that they can produce the boxwood more quickly. And it's especially important for boxwood. Boxwood is under pressure from boxwood blight. So that's something you should be aware of. I think supplies of boxwood are going to be tight because growers are really worried about boxwood. And it's a disease that can be in the landscape. If you're working with boxwood, please use good hygiene. You know, don't go over to the neighbor's boxwood and prune them and then come over and prune yours. You know, disinfect your tools. Just be very careful with boxwood. If you are looking at boxwood and you see one that doesn't look quite right, I encourage you to have Extension look at it and make sure that it isn't boxwood blight, because once you have that in a planting, it can spread. I'm not aware of it being a problem here, but it's a problem in other areas. And knowing about it, being aware of it, same with rosette virus. You know, especially if you are a commercial landscaper, look those up, be aware of the symptoms so that if you do see them on a planting, an established planting, or plants that you're bringing in for a new planting, that you don't use them, because that can create lots of problems. So anyway, Sprinter is faster growing, so our growers can hopefully kind of get ahead of boxwood blight. But they're also looking to dodge it completely. And that's why we introduced Gembox, which is the Ilex glabra. So this is one of our native plants, inkberry. We introduced Gembox because it looks a lot like a boxwood. It's about the same size. It takes shearing like a boxwood does. Unlike older Ilex glabra, it's nice and full. It doesn't get leggy on the bottom. So it really can be used interchangeably with boxwood. The only cautions I would say is I would not put it in quite as deep a shade as boxwood. It'll go into part shade just fine, but I don't know that I'd put it in super deep shade. It is deer resistant. I am not prepared to say it is as deer resistant as boxwood, but it's still a pretty awesome substitute or alternative to boxwood, and we're really excited about it. And then this is Chamaecyparis soft serve. Beautiful, beautiful plant. Very elegant in its form. Very nice soft foliage. Just a beautiful specimen plant. I think you should have no problems with it around here. If you are in a more exposed place, I would worry a little bit about wind, but I think most around here you should be fine. Soft serve gold is an introduction for this year, so I'm teasing you a little bit. Chamaecyparis is slow growing. You're probably not going to be able to get a full-sized soft serve gold for another couple years, but now you know about it, so you can save space for it because it's got a nice gold color to it. I think you could use these maybe as you would a dwarf Alberta spruce. If you've got more room, I like this. This is North Pole Thuja occidentalis. This was selected in Minnesota, so you know it can take cold and it can take snow and it can take wind. Very fastigiate, so nice narrow columns, which is very, very useful in a lot of situations. And we're seeing more demand for that. That's why we've had these columnar hibiscus. So this is a rose of Sharon that's very columnar. This is one that my friend out in San Francisco is super excited about, because if you think about it, you're in there are people out there, their backyards are like half the size of this greenhouse, and you can have a row of these to screen your yard from your neighbor's yard. And Rose of Sharon doesn't get enough respect for being so useful because it's tough. It can take heat, it can take dry conditions, it can take clay soil. I think they'll even take some black walnut maybe. They're tough as nails. And butterflies like them too. Look at these pretty flowers. They're just a great plant. So we're excited about purple pillar, and let's see if I have more purple pillar. I think there's a lot of applications there. And then this is one that we're introducing this year, so it's a couple years away from being at retail. This is white pillar. So I'm excited about this one too. So again, looking for plants that are helpful, that solve some problems. And then sometimes we just need plants that are just pretty and nice. And that's where we come to At Last. At Last is a fragrant rose. So rose breeders have done an awesome job of breeding disease-resistant roses. Really, if you're looking for a landscape rose that you don't need to spray, pick a color, any color, we could probably find a rose for you. But the breeding, somewhere along the way, they lost the fragrance. So we're really excited that one of our rose breeders in the UK was able to get the fragrance back into it. And this is At Last Rose. So beautiful, peachy color, just a really nice plant. So if you're interested, we did put a planting of these in at the Crane Estate, Castle Hill. They put these in their old rose garden, and it's this kind of crumbling, derelict, you expect to see Mr. Darcy come out, and that's just me. But beautiful estate, and they planted these fragrant roses last year. So I am hoping that by this summer they will have established nicely and put on some growth. If you get a chance, go out there, check it out, stage a photo op, I don't know. But it should be beautiful, and I think the fragrance as you walk into that rose garden is really going to be awesome. So I'm excited about that. I need to make up can I come out here again in the summer? Okay. At Last Rose. So finally, I want to put in a little thing for the Grand Garden Show. If anyone has had the Grand Hotel on their bucket list, we do have a consumer event on Mackinac Island. It's the weekend before Labor Day. So it's pretty fun. You can stay at the Grand Hotel, and then you get to tour the gardens on Mackinac Island. So this is a chance to see cottages, you know, like the people who live there have, there's no cars, right? There's no cars on Mackinac Island. You get there and you walk or you ride a bike or you take a horse. And, you know, so the rich people who live there have really expensive horses, like horses that cost as much as my house. I'm not kidding. And they drive them in these carriages, and you get to see their beautiful gardens. It's really, really fun. I will warn you, getting there is hard. From here, if you flew into Detroit, it'd be about a 4 or 5 hour drive to here, and then you take a ferry across to Mackinac Island. But it is fun. It's, as I said, it's a bucket list thing for a lot of people to see the Grand Hotel and just to experience Mackinac. So if you've always been looking for an excuse, this could be the excuse you need to go see some pretty gardens. And yeah, this is the landscaper on Mackinac Island with one of his plantings. Just, it's fun. I hope you can make it sometime. And thanks for having me.
This is Deb Moore for How Does Your Garden Grow? Thank you for spending your precious time with us today, and remember, make your life bloom.